My name is Kam Star. I'm one of the founders of PlayGen. I'm a geek. I was born a geek. I've been messing around with computers from as long as I remember. The very first piece of software that I published and sold was in 1986, and so that makes it nearly 26 years. For my sins, I did architecture. That's kind of traditional architecture, which kind of taught me how to mix aesthetics with physical limitations and sort of being able to mix the technical and the creative, and that put me in a really good stead in especially the gaming space, but in software development in general, and especially software that people have to use, where there is a serious creative side and there's a technical aspect that kind of need to meet. So PlayGen was really born out of a desire to do more with gaming technology. I'd worked previously in the gaming space. I worked on a couple of what they call AAA title games, both Monopoly Tycoon and Risk. And what I'd learned from that is you can create things that millions of people use. And I had this desire to use gaming and gaming technology outside pure entertainment. So much like in Hollywood, people create fantasy films. Outside Hollywood, people want to create documentaries to show the real world and what it's all about. In a very similar vein, I feel that I use gaming as a filmmaker would, in the sense that I start to tackle and I work with real world issues, and that brings me into the world of simulation, a lot of which uses gaming technology. So essentially, PlayGen is an R&D studio. We're a research and development studio that looks at the crossroads between gaming technology and what applications it can have outside the entertainment world. And that's what we've been focusing on for the last 11 years. So some of the hard issues that we've looked at in PlayGen have been things like drinking and driving for defense, and we work with US DoD, Department of Defense, in looking at tackling drinking and driving within the armed forces. In the UK, we've worked with the MOD at behavioural platforms to look at how we can influence behaviour out on the internet. We've also worked with the police services in creating games and creating solutions that tackle things like violence, extreme violence, attitude towards humiliation, and all those kind of very difficult things. We've also worked with the NHS in tackling issues like teenage pregnancy. So these are difficult things to talk to people about. And in the more commercial sector, we've worked in the space of finance around money laundering and around data security. So issues that are very important that people need to be aware of, and how you can use some of the gaming technology and simulation technology to have a higher impact in transferring the message to somebody and helping them realize the direction they're going and helping them realize what is going wrong or what could go wrong if something happens. Far more effective than a book, far more effective than a video, essentially because it's an interactive experience. And these interactive experiences allow you to understand a little bit more than just being a passive observer of something. So it's about an active accumulation of knowledge rather than a kind of a passive way of accumulating knowledge. So a typical example might be tackling teenage pregnancy. And what we know from huge masses of data is that if you have a better relationship with your children, they're far less likely to be to fall pregnant as a teenager. So what we then create based on that knowledge are vehicles for parents and children to play together in order to explore sex and relationships, and in order to help them build that bond, bridge that gap, and reduce teenage pregnancy. So it's a lot of what we do is based on is evidence-based. A lot of what we do is based on psychology, but a lot of what we actually end up creating are stories and our narratives, or playable narratives, that you either play with others or you play in a group or by yourself in order to understand a particular concept. So we've developed a whole series of solutions specifically to be delivered on the cloud, for the simple reason that we have big spikes in users, and because A lot of the information is very rich in graphical terms. The bandwidth required are not just like a normal site. There's a reasonable amount of bandwidth that's required, and for that experience to flow, when you suddenly have 30,000 people turn on something to try and look at it on a 9 a.m. and it needs to be there. The only way to really deliver that is through a cloud infrastructure. And through a system that can actually scale and deliver that bandwidth when you need it. Previously, we were mostly reliant on single servers, and frankly, there are limits to what a single server can do, no matter how much you bolster it. And we found that some of the customers were coming back and saying, hey, I'm getting timed out here, or I'm not getting the experience that I want. And moving into the cloud, which we started in 2009, was something that we just had to do. It's what was required. For us, the concept of big data is really, big data without an understanding it isn't really anything. Just having lots and lots of numbers means very little to us. So what we try and do is we try and find meaning in the data that we capture. One of the projects we did here was digital shortage, where we went around and collected a lot of information about all the companies that are essentially in what we call tech city, in the sort of the Shoreditch area, who are doing digital work. And this was deep information regarding who they work for, how they define themselves, what keywords they use, what it is that they're doing. A lot of our time is spent in crafting and analysing what this data means, so that we can create a narrative of what people are doing, who they're doing it for, and what are the trends. We're a firm believer that whilst algorithms can certainly identify a general area of something or show you a general area of something, actual sense making comes down to experts or people who are spending a considerable amount of time understanding the intimacies and the other kind of relationships which isn't perhaps captured in the data. I think the biggest challenges for big data is essentially that of the technical aspect of it. It just being able to and then sense making at the same time, which is the art of it. So the science of it is, how do you hold all this data? What data do you hold? How do you create connections between them? And the art of it is how do you make sense of these masses of information, and what does it mean, and how can you run experiments and come up with solutions? Because from a financial perspective, the benefits of having lots of information is and if you can use that proactively, means that you can continue to improve a process. So if we have an online game and we can see that people are dropping off at a certain point, and that the data is telling us that that's obviously too hard, irrespective of what the game designer is saying, that point in that game is too hard, that's what the data is showing us, we'll go back in, improve that, and we'll make a better game for it. The other huge potentials in looking at big data is being able to spot patterns, being able to spot trends, being able to be a little bit ahead of a guess, I guess, you know, in terms of what's coming up or what folks are most interested in. So from what I see in the financial space, there's a huge opportunity in being able to spot things like fraud, and this is something that's been going on for a very, very long time. It's probably one of the most established areas in big data. In the health space, it's largely untouched, it seems, because most of our health records are not accessible. So we can't say for certainty that me or you or somebody we know is going to have a very high risk of heart disease or a certain type of cancer. We can't do something about that. Now, obviously, if we built platforms that use the data that we have on our day-to-day in the way that we move or the things that interact with, we can start to create very pragmatic solutions that could be beneficial. And I think outside the finance, because I look at the finance world as really the leading edge of using big data. Not only all transactions are recorded, but you know that there's money at stake, and it's very, very close to being something commercial if you can spot something before something goes wrong. But there are tremendous opportunities, I think, in transport, there are tremendous opportunities in health, I think in education, that we haven't even begun to embrace digital really in education, but I think there's also another huge area of opportunity in using big data in education to improve educational processes, to improve the way we find talent, that we help to talent to flourish. I think it's paramount that people who are far ahead in this journey, who have shown the value, who've shown the return on investment, showcase what they're doing. It's not always easy because very often what we find is if we're doing a very good job, the client is not inclined to share that with anyone else because this is their competitive advantage. But as long as we can go around some of these and perhaps talk in more kind of generic terms, but at least focus on the principles of what we're trying to do, by bringing everybody together, we have a far greater chance of actually making a longer lasting impact, and we have a chance for those who are sitting on the fence and who really don't understand the benefit to take a serious look in this space and perhaps start developing something in that space.